today's lecture would be about marketing integrity, fostering a professional assessment process. Of course, before I start, I would like to thank you for your attendance, and I am honored that you are here today. And the workshop itself has come to fruition out of sheer luck, out of conversation. I was asked a question, and the workshop has come to an answer. Of course, I'm always ready in assisting the institution in any way, shape, or form. The topic today would be about increasing awareness, with the topic at hand. We will be approaching marketing in a different perspective. We also need to comprehend what the workshop objective is. We want to know what the objective is and what we will gain from the objective of the workshop. Number one, we need to clarify a distinct association in the assessment process, especially cognitive procedures. Number two, we must have an authentic confrontation in our conceived notions within the level of our thinking. And then we'll move to discuss the topics to configure the objective process. We will go through the cognitive marketing process, and then we'll have the application of cognitive initiative, and then we would move forward to separate that cognitive initiative. We will separate that cognitive initiative from the actual assessment process. Why do we need to understand the cognitive initiative or the reasoning or association within the purpose of the process of assessment? Because sometimes we are unaware of how we conduct our processing or assessment procedures, unconsciously actually marking without having the awareness of what's happening. So we will justify that cognitive procedure. We will analyze that cognitive procedure. We will know how that association of cognitive procedure happens, and then we will attempt in separating with what is inseparable. Okay, and how it would affect the marketing process. So at the beginning, at the start, we will start with the technicalities, things that are more normalized or things that you are aware of, and some of you, of course, have much more academic experience than me, and I respect that, and I'm honored that you are all here to learn or understand my perspective for the assessment process from a philosophical understanding. Okay, so we'll start with technical, move towards theory, and then move towards philosophy. The philosophy today that we will be talking about is the philosophy of similarity. There are different aspects of philosophy today. The philosophy that we'll be talking about is the philosophy of similarity. Okay, and then we'll end the workshop with the resonation, or how to resonate and comprehend or conceptualize the process of assessment. Okay, so number one, this is a saying rather than a workshop. It is, we are not exempt or free of errors. Rather, we will try and control or minimize those errors. We will try and control or minimize those errors. Those errors are simple mistakes, intended or unintended sometimes. We are going to delve deep into intentions, conscious and unconscious. At the end, hopefully, we can reach a conclusion or an objective that we can control and be error-free during the assessment process. Okay, so we are not exempt at the beginning. I will be talking about smaller things that are more simplified, and we will be more complex or complicated later into the workshop. So of course, at the preparation section or being prepared for the semester, these are simple projections or simple associations where you might set a timeline or understand the timeline of your semester, understand the exam dates, understand the actual calendar or academic calendar, be prepared or set up in your own perspective, in your own computer, have the sections allocated correctly, put stakeholders in the right place, This will take the first 3 or 4 weeks of the semester rather than waiting for the assessment process. Why be prepared? Why have templates? Why move forward and be proactive? Because the more we are proactive, the less fatigue or mood swings we will have during the workload in the assessment process. So we are not rushed. We don't do things later on. We start at the beginning of the semester, even from when we go through the beginning, the first week, the add and drop period. And I do this myself. The first 3 weeks, I set up the timelines and syllabus and everything together in my preparation to understand what is required from me for the rest of the semester. So when the assessment process comes comes to fruition, I am all set up. There's nothing to do than actually understand the criteria or the marking guidelines, the same, and attempt and go ahead with the assessment. Okay, so each semester is different. Some of the preparation things, downloading exam dates, these are very simplified things, and most of the academics know them already. Creating Excel sheets, creating upload files, allocating those upload files, setting up each folder accordingly, selecting the most effective and efficient plan for the semester. This will be more individual. Each person would gain an individual perspective of the plan for their semester. All of us teach different courses, all of us have different job descriptions, all of us have different initiatives within the course itself. And then, of course, it depends on the allocation in the time depending on the allocation you receive in that part of the preparation. And then setting the plan. When you set the plan, this is, of course, in the first quarter of the semester. We are all academics here. The first quarter, I mean the first 2 to 4 weeks. First quarter, all of the first 3 to 4 slides should be understood, should be conducted, where you understand the course objectives, reviewing the syllabus with the students, understanding the learning outcome, understanding the workload that you have. This is the integration of the buffer zone to reduce errors. We want to reduce errors. When we are proactive, which is conducting or fixing issues or problems prior to their occurrence, we are being proactive. When we are proactive, we can achieve more with less time, thus becoming more efficient. So proactivity reduces workload, of course, improves time management. Time management is essential in our line of work. Early identification of students' needs. You identify the needs of the students earlier when you have the conceptions of the actual course syllabus. The crisis prevention will enhance student engagement because we will improve our classroom management and thus effective learning. So the assessment comes to fruition now. As an example, the first thing I conduct with my students is I convey the weights or power or strength of the assessment process with how much time needs to be allocated to each assessment. Because the assessment, the main factor of each assessment in any university or institution is to train. You must be trained. So we use the assessment processes to train the students so they can go forward to the final exam. So allocation of times, when you do 4 hours for the preparation of presentation, the midterm takes 30 to 40 hours, the final exams takes 40 to 50 hours. So the more marks that are weighted, the more allocation of actual timing from the students. So these are just an example of what I convey to my students. And then now we will, of course, be moving away from the normalities or away from the normal things, the last line of understanding the normalities of academics, and then we'll move forward to more complicated or more philosophical things. So be aware of the norms during assessment processes. Be aware of the norms during assessment processes. The norms, I mean the normal things that may occur during your assessment. Number one is mood or fatigue. Your mood or your fatigue during the assessment process may affect your judgment. It may affect your judgment, where we should follow the criteria 100%, and then we come to setting up an unsuitable environment. When you have an unsuitable environment, the creation of the correct environment can induce a better conscious assessment process. And then the cognitive load becoming overwhelmed. When you have many sections, you don't do the proactivity, you become overwhelmed. And when you become overwhelmed, you are rushed into taking shortcuts. The theory of heuristics is taking shortcuts, where you skim over the actual exam, consciously intended or unintended. When you do heuristic approach, you take shortcuts rather than an objective approach. These are the norms that we might face. Time constraints, where superficial assessment over reliance on initial impressions. We'll go deeper into initial impressions when we get to the biased and unbiased assessments. And then at the end, confirmation bias, where we take into account what's happened in the last assessment with the student will happen in future assessment, which is wrong and should not be taken into perspective. It's called confirmation bias, where initial submissions from the students, being good or bad, he got 3 out of 30 or 30 out of 30, will inflict unconsciously into the person's mind future submissions. Okay, of course, now we will gradually move away in a compounded effect towards a conventional idea of procedures that may be greater of complexity. So the next slide, we have rationality and irrationality. Understanding rationality and irrationality, when you are more rational in your approach, you align your outcomes with the criteria provided. So thus the marking guidelines. You are aligned with it. You don't move away with the alignment in a good way or a bad way. Being lenient or thus being impartially non-lenient or strict. And then when we talk about consistency, the issue is when you become irrational or consistent, the best basis of measurement is giving the same mark to the same mark. That is when we talk about theory and not numbers. When we talk about theory and not numbers, is providing or assessing a paper in the same grade that is identical work. If it's identical, receives the correct mark for both papers, then you are becoming unbiased and rational. And then we go to some of the theories behind the virtue-based rationality, where the assessment process takes into account the integrity, fairness, diligence, and upholding academic justification, and avoiding shortcuts or independent judgments. And we will come into independent judgments in a few slides' time, where we try and connect our thoughts and our mind with what and how it affects us during a process, coming from academics. And then we come to logical irrationality, or assigning different grades, as I just said, to identical. We come to psychological irrationality, occurs when emotions, unconscious cognitive bias override reason. So when psychological irrationality overrides your reason of giving the grade, you have become irrational, and thus resulting in bias. It is very much unconscious sometimes. And then identity and essentialism. Identity and essentialism is an extension of that should be eroded. Identity and essentialism is an extension that should be eroded. What does that mean? It's having an impression from the student that he or she is lazy or gifted, that he or she does not care, that he or she does not take into account educational or the institutional university. This should be eroded from the perspective of academics. Should not be taken into account. And the process itself should be taken into account. Now we get to biased and unbiased assessments. So when we consider biased and unbiased assessment, we take into account the assessment occurs when unrelated factors, unrelated, something not related to the assessment itself, influences the evaluation of the student performance. Something that does not come within the academia we process into our daily lives. And thus it influences the outcome of the assessment itself. And then we have anchoring bias, we're benchmarking students. The same thing as the irrationality, where we look at first submissions and subsequent submissions, and thus assuming the same degree of level. And then we come to the types of biases, implicit or explicit biases, which mean intended and unintended. And we will be concentrating today on unintended biases. Intended biases are more of an ethical approach. Intended biases comes within the morality of the person, rather than the unconscious, unintended behavior that an academic constitutes how he gets towards the assessment process. Okay, so when we come to the unintended, the preconceived notions, meaning that we have notions or ideas or resemblance or associations of the students that are built into our mind prior to the assessment process. And we're going to get to how that is configured into our mind. Okay, so we come to blind grading is of paramount importance, where we do blind grading. We come to evaluation free from conscious or unconscious bias, solely established on the criteria, and when I say criteria, I mean marking guidelines, maintaining academic integrity, grading in batches, where you can become more consistent when grading in batches, and maintaining application of the criteria itself. More biased and unbiased assessment. This is the last line of unbiased and unbiased assessment. It's unconsciously penalizing students. This is one that arises with us sometimes, where I have had the experience from students where they've come so far from first year into the last year of their education. They were so poor in their assessment at the beginning, and they've developed, because education is a growth system. It is not a one-by-one system. It is more compounded effect of educational growth, and we should encourage that. So sometimes we have suspicion when a student has unusual improvement, where he is improved considerably from getting 20 out of 100 in the first year and receiving 100 out of 100 in the last year. We suspect dishonesty sometimes, and that can be conceived as a preconceived notion that there is dishonesty from the student. Of course, sometimes we do not realize that. But what I will try and attempt today is increase or train your awareness on how to identify these solutions to these issues. Okay, emotional contagion, where feelings about a class or course material can affect your assessment outcome. Where the timing, for example, of the class, or the participation of the class, or the attitude of the class, positive or negative, may affect unconsciously the academic's mind. And then biases may harm students' future. This is becoming to resonation, where we'll end the slide with resonation, where we should resonate with our students. We should understand that this mechanism of institutional university is there to implement a future perspective of enlightenment to the student. This is why we are around. And thus, you can standardize your approach, increase and train your awareness. Increase and train your awareness. Now we get to the part where, of course, there's the cause and effect of benchmarking, of biases and unbiases, the favoritism, where we have stereotyping or some type of understanding the student. We have the halo effect where performance measures, of course it is not clear here, but it's clear right here, affects the measures of the classroom reports. And then we have the recency bias. We have the recency effect, where the students that come to you last are the students that you think about more when you go into the process of assessment. It's called recency effect or bias. If we are all done by, I apologize, of course, what we will talk about needs more than coffee, and we will try and understand cognitive association, and then we will understand the isolation of that cognitive association and how we may connect and create ideas into our mind. So there's a test in Harvard that conducts mental association. What do I mean by mental association? Mental association, I mean where we measure the strength of association between concepts and evaluation or stereotypes. Where we measure the connection of assessment or stereotypes. Now we get to the isolation of association, of connection and resemblance. What do I mean by the isolation of association, of connection and resemblance? So the workshop takes mindfulness of the process. We must understand how to develop our cognitive association. We sometimes fail in our perception to actually understand the students. The philosophy of the isolation is the ideas and how the ideas are built. How our ideas are built. So, according to Hume and other people, our ideas are built from impressions. Our ideas are built from impressions. So the ideas themselves are experience, knowledge, and evidence. They are created into an idea. What do I mean by an idea? I mean how we think, or how we create, or how we assemble our ideas into our mind. There are two types of ideas. There are simple ideas and there are complex ideas. Complex ideas, according to the similarity of philosophy, or philosophy we're talking about today, is similarity philosophy, is complex ideas are rearranged into our mind and restructured and developed into a creation of a new idea. So the question here, when we talk about the isolation of association and connection and resemblance, first of all, we have the mental association, and then we have the question of, do we think randomly? Do we actually think randomly? Does anyone believe yes? I don't think. Do we process our cognitive behavior randomly? No. It is not randomly based. So first of all, we will talk about what association is. Association has three principles. Association has three principles. Number one is the resemblance. Resemblance is the connection of ideas into similarity or weight. So when I resemble two things that have similarity. Number one principle of association, according to the philosophy of similarity, where Hume, Kant, Plato, Aristotle all talk about it. All talk about it. So number one, we have resemblance. This is association principles, where we have resemblance, where we link the ideas according to similarity. And then number two, we have contiguity, where we experience or conceive impressions at the same power, at the same time, the same space. In physics, it's called a vacuum. So we experience something at the same time, the same place. We have resemblance in those two things. And then at the end, we have causation or cause and effect. Where in physics or maths, we have a cause and effect, where we understand that the cause of something may affect something else. Thus reaching something called consistent conjunction, which means if I think of fire, I also think of what? Heat. If I think of fire, at the same time I think of heat. I did not talk about heat. I only talked about the fire. So this is the idea of constant conjunction. Why do I say this? Why am I talking about this right now? Because when us as academics do our research or do our reading or model development, we create something like this. The structuring of cognitive procedures. The structuring of cognitive procedures, where we create the idea out of research. What did I read last week? I read the book of Human Treatment. Does that have to do anything with when I teach BS strategic management with Dr. Salah and before Dr. Jabal? No, but this is what I read. So what I will try to attempt today, my objective is isolate those two things. And then when we have the idea, we assemble them and organize them into our group. We assemble them and organize them. And in a matter of weight and in a matter of perspective similarities, where they are similar in two things. And then at the end, we reassemble them and connect them. Connect them to other ideas, other experiences, other resemblance, other things, where I take my mind with me where I go. And it is built. So in the power of shared qualities, characteristics, and association of strength and habit. So now we have established. Now we have established. And I really hope one day that neither Google nor ChatGPT will be able to tell you what my readings has told me. I really would hope that happens, that does never happen, and I would have significance in my institutions today or in the future. So we have established that we do not think randomly. We do not think randomly. We create our mind. So if we do not think randomly, so ideas are not created by random, by impressions, by experience, by knowledge, knowledge being reading, hearing, listening. Today you are having experience, knowledge, and impressions. Today you are having this. You take this into your mind, either in significance or strength, or in any other way. So by creating a principle of association, which constitutes the process cognitive structuring, thus governing procedure. What do I mean, thus governing procedure? So when I create ideas, resemble them in similarity, and associate them in connection, and other type of thinking, I thus build a governing body to proceed in my mind, where it controls the way I think. I can control it, I can isolate it, I can imagine it, I can think about it, but I can never completely isolate the way that the ideas and impressions govern the way the structure of my mind works. Because it depends on what you do or what you experience in other things. And then we come to impressions. We talked about that, and simple and complex ideas. We already talked about that itself. So establishing the association principle with resemblance, continuity, and causation. The issue here is we do not realize or understand that this is sometimes happening. We don't know. We are not aware, or we do not comprehend that this is how we process our structure in our mind, or how we think. And this affects our assessment process. Because the hundreds of hours that I've read in the last 3 years should not affect what the student writes in his assessment process. The criteria provided by the institution should be the right or correct way, approach in assessing the actual student. And sometimes I have had that experience myself with a lot of professors when I was in the UK at an older age or a younger age, where they expected from me something other than what was expected, according to their cognitive understanding. So when we come to the ideas of resemblance, in order to tend to recall them spontaneous, uncontrolled, and randomized, the ideas are created, and the structuring of cognitive from an idea to assembling that idea, And then, of course, how it affects us and the philosophy of personal style. So each one of us has a personal philosophy. Myself, coming from artificial intelligence or finance, I can associate with Dr. Salah, Dr. Dalal, Dr. Hassan, Dr. Aziz. I can very much associate with them. We have the same procedure of how we govern our mind. So this can sometimes take into effect without, I'm not talking about conscious, I'm talking unintended, unconscious behavior. Unconscious, without your intuition. Because if it was conscious and intended, biased in a rational way, then you are on the gray area of ethical misconduct. And I will not go into the philosophy of morality, virtue, or ethical understanding, because that's not why we are here today. We are not here to talk about vice and virtue or morality. We are here to talk about unconscious behavior that is unintended, that we would like to increase awareness and thus isolate. We want to, that's why it's called the isolation of association and connection and resemblance. But it's hard. It is very hard, because you may ask me, and this is a quote, but I have changed that quote from Hume in 1714, where he said, "We may not and cannot separate what is inseparable." Can we separate what we think? No. But we can control what we think. Can we separate the governing structure, the procedures of how we process our mind? No. But we can control it and isolate it. This is what we try, the objective of today, is to isolate. Reasoning is the best approach. When you have reasoning, it's the best approach. But when you don't have reasoning, you try to unconsciously, unintendedly grade in a good way or in a bad way, strict or lenient, then you are unconsciously becoming biased. Okay, and then we talk about increasing awareness, and this is from Kant. Kant is an English, Immanuel Kant is an English philosopher, and he talks about the golden mean, where we try to develop a temperament control. We try to develop a temperament control. Through what? Through practice and habit, and recognition of occurrence. Recognition of occurrence is not Plato or anyone else, it's me, but through recognizing that this is happening again. The assessment process will happen this semester, next year, the year after, the year after. It will never stop. It will continue happening. So you need to increase your awareness and control, develop a temperament control through practice, where you control your unconscious bias. This is the issue. This is when I was approached and the workshop came to fruition. It was through conversation, and it was through a question I was asked by a very dear friend. I was asked a question. How can we think or analyze unintended, unconscious behavior of variation and moving away from the mean when we actually mark the assessments? And then we come to the resonation itself. What do I mean by resonation? What I mean by resonation here is how we understand the user. Resonation is understanding the user, understanding the person, understanding the student, understanding what this means to them, what the degree holds to the future of the students themselves. And resonate. Increase your awareness. Understand what that means to the person in front of the academic. Understand. Be aware that their perspective to the institution or the university is not the same perspective that we see. It's not the same. So what it holds to the future, conceptualize the law of perspectivity, understand the student's behavior, have mindfulness when conducting assessments, understand the challenges and ambiguity in the student's experience. Education, of course, is a compounded effect, and our students should do it. We should isolate as well first-year students with fourth-year students. We should consider how we approach the first-year students and how we approach the fourth-year students. First year is encourage growth and education. Last year, encourage future academia. It's a different perspective. So understanding and the resonation with the students themselves, avoid making assumptions. Avoid making assumptions is a very perspectively unconceptualized thinking where we have preconceived notions, where we think of something else and we assume. We assume things that may not occur. This is when we try to connect or associate in a resemblance way that is not within a power of similarity, nor power, nor strength, nothing of the sorts. And the end note, that's the end note, of course, reason alone cannot motivate action. This is me writing at 2 in the morning, so please accept me writing. So I mean, reason cannot motivate action. Emotional intelligence are the forces behind our decision making, so control your emotions. This is me, of course, as I say, writing at 2 o'clock in the morning. Base your approach on solid foundation. Conceive the notion of assessment and process to encourage growth within the institution. Why should we do all of this? Because through connection and resemblance and without isolation, we can create a distrust by the students in the institution itself. We can create these distrust. This trust will build in the students when they think or realize or conceptualize that the institution is biased towards their assessment process. So encourage them to the best education, and I wish them all the best in the future. And that's it from me. You can read the references if you can find them. Thank you so much. You can take questions.
First of all, thank you for your time, approach, and contributions. Could you go back and elaborate around the topic that discusses the idea of confirmation bias?
Yes.
A simple example.
Of course.
عندي good example على هذا اللي unconscious. And the fellow is very interesting. Who I do the same thing. Unconscious bias, especially when the Parasa it's hidden, the name is you cannot see everything. You have the MG, so sometimes you cannot be biased because you have the market guidelines does not belong to you. You can and you have to do it yourself. The unconscious here, the example that it's very good that you were talking about here, and I was like seeing myself in it, is when I did the sheet nafsa, and the handwriting is horrible. I decided that حتى لو يكون is great student, unintentionally in my back mind, think it's bad. Always prejudging, as you mentioned, it's a great example, just because his handwriting is not good.
I have the worst handwriting. I have the
has
worst
nothing to
handwriting.
do with
Yes,
exactly.
yes, I have the worst handwriting. For me, I can't read my own handwriting. I use a computer. For me, I have from a young age, I have a very bad handwriting. That does not take into perspective what I can achieve. But I believe your question was on confirmation bias. Yes? Confirmation bias is when you expect, today you're coming, yes, and you expected something from me as an academic, as a colleague to you. If I did not perform as well as you know me, and you think that I would perform, then you would confirm in your way here that you believe that Azam will do something great. This is confirmation bias, where you connect something that happens in the past and you believe it will happen again. It's a naive approach where you confirm between yourself and your idea that the expectation of the first judgment will occur again. This is what confirmation bias is. Other,
Yes, first of all, thank you very much
You're
for
welcome.
this very insightful presentation.
Yeah.
That's very conducive to much critical thinking from outside, particularly prior to assessment. And I just want to tell you about something that just happened yesterday.
Okay.
And I gave the student a makeup quiz. And she was in such a haste, please, can you please just grade it now? And I said, I'm sorry, after 2 lectures back to back, I need to go back home so that I can do you justice. So she understood that we have to do it.
Yeah.
So this is the mood and the fatigue, the unsuitable
Yes.
environment. Really, we have to take care
Yes.
about this in our
True.
assessment for
True.
more, I would say, let's say, very, an assessment that is very fair and not biased.
True. True. Other questions? Thank you.
Support, thank you, Dr. Azam, for this interesting topic. You're most welcome. I hope it will continue from our colleagues. I don't know what to call it, question. This is from our side, as a tutor or other marker or other evaluator, we can say. What about the assessment designer? Does them consider this issue when they are designing the assessment? This is very important because they have two sides, marker, and I'm designing assessment for certified tutor in Saudi, in Bahrain, in Kuwait, in England, okay? So, do I consider them when I'm designing this? It's a very important.
If you would like me to approach your question from a philosophical understanding, we would go through a perspective of vice and virtue. It would not go through the design process. Here, we are talking about the markers themselves. But the structure of designing the exams, we would not talk about unconscious, because there are no effects when designing the exams. There is no unconscious behavior. But when we mark, there is unconscious behavior. We are overwhelmed with work. We are being rushed. We have students coming to us. But when you work in the background, when you work behind the scenes, when you submit a marking guideline or a criteria that the students don't know who submitted. But the designing and the creation of assessment will not talk about unconscious and conscious behavior and intention. It will talk about vice and virtue and morality, where we try and benefit everyone, regardless of anything else. Where we try and design the criteria towards a way that does not marginalize people. Marginalize people by designing an assessment means you are creating an assessment that would benefit people with better numerical thinking, better English, better language. So this will be morality, vice, and virtue, rather than conscious and unconscious isolation of resemblance. Here we are talking about a different perspective. So the answer to your question is, I don't mind, but the structure of designing it would go through another type of philosophy. Thank you. Question?
Me?
Yeah.
I was not raising my hand, but actually, thank you for this
You're
interesting topic. It's really important, and we need another session to talk about techniques how to eliminate this effect of bias. Especially in assessment. Even in statistics, there is a complete type of research talking about how to reinvent the marks by elimination the bias effect in the marks. It's very interesting. So I'm really looking for another session talking about techniques, procedures, mechanisms to eliminate this effect, because it will still and it will stay there.
Yes.
And it's affecting the students, tutors, and everyone.
Yes.
Yes.
This theory, the golden mean by Kant, my own Kant, is around 293 pages. So when we talk about the isolation of separation, what is not separable, we can control it rather than completely separate it. It's increase in emotional intelligence, increase in conscious behavior, increase in awareness within the faculty themselves. Understand that. So one perspective of it, just that, is around 293 pages. So, yes, you are right that here, number one is increase your awareness. Understand what's happening. Have a conscious driver that controls your decisions rather than your emotions and unintended behavior. If we go too deep into philosophy, then we will never come back. We will never come back. But one of the things that is from my readings is the golden mean, where we develop a temperament control, where sometimes you might behave differently according to what you might think, or what you might feel, or what you might assume. You might behave differently. So here we're trying to isolate. That's it. Any other questions? Oh.
I mentioned something about the consistency.
Yeah.
Sometimes we found some answers from students when they give ideas and they convince their teachers. In a way, that's more than mentioned in the marking guidelines. But then we surprised with the comments about student examiners, hey, you didn't go ahead with the consistency.
Yeah.
You need to be able to do this.
Yeah.
So how can we?
How did you judge that the student did better than the marking guidelines?
Well, he tried to convince me through his examples, through his ideas. The students is distinguished as he is working somewhere. He is a manager. He is a financial.
I understand.
So he gave me ideas which I don't know about. He convinced me about this.
Yes.
And I said, no, you are wrong because you are not related. It's not related with the planning guidelines. What kind of guidelines?
Okay. This would be unfair to other students to answer according to the criteria. So the idea here is your judgment is essential. But when you grade it better, that is not related to the criteria, even if it's better than the criteria, this does not take into account the external. This takes into account the other students, where they answer according to the criteria, and he receives the same grade only. So the consequence would be the students rather than the external examiner. And following the criteria is essential, of course. Following the criteria of the marking guidelines is essential. And we try to develop a process, even if the student comes up to me and answers, and he writes about David Hume's third book. I cannot give you one. Because I did not ask this from him. I should, because this will undermine other students. They will ask me, why did you not tell us to write about David Hume?
Remember, this is social science, so does mathematics, what was meant to do. Here we are essentially this view,
Yes.
and that's why we are trying to give us new ideas.
Yes.
To read more. Why? Because
Related ideas, yes?
Yes.
Related.
Yes.
Related. Okay. Critical. When we talk about critical thinking, there's another perspective. But to his question, I believe that when you provide marks to something unrelated to the criteria, you are not being biased towards the external or anyone else, or you are being biased to the students. Because the students tell you, why did you not tell us to write about about anything? So the relation, why is there a criteria? The criteria is here to try and create an assembly line of process and how we approach it. This is why the criteria is around. The criteria is there to create fairness, to create integrity, to create a flat surface, that everyone is within a consistent, undiscriminated way.
Does this theory apply to multiple choice questions?
Which theory?
Your philosophy about
You know, when he asked me this question, I talked about vice, virtue, humility, and morality. I read that David said that some professors approach multiple choice to distinguish different ethnic groups than other ethnic groups. So there is a philosophy of approach, but the philosophy is not a similarity philosophy. The philosophy we are talking about today talks about resemblance and association and similarity and thinking and conception and isolating. But when we talk about undermining, we talk about moral behavior. We talk about vice and virtue. We talk about approaching an assessment process where the creation of the criteria does not undermine anyone, regardless of the stereotype. This is what I would be able to answer you. That the creation of a multiple choice would undermine some groups than others. Because it's language-based, inconsistent. It does not take language into perspective. You can guess it. So you would undermine people with good, proficient language. So that is a philosophical thing. But we'll not spend too much on philosophy. Sorry.
Following the question of Dr. Basil asking about objective questions, I need to ask about the subjective assessment or creative work, creative output. What strategies can educators implement to ensure working with integrity, especially to assess these kind of subjective assessments?
What do you mean by subjective assessment?
Like essays, like creative outputs, like our TMAs. For example, we ask the students to put creative work. There is no specific marking guidelines to put specific marking guidelines like we do in the objective questions. So for creative output, like essays, like TMAs, we have in management and in marketing. So if there any, because we highlighted here the causes, the problems.
Yeah.
So we need to identify also the solutions or specific strategies. Are there any specific strategies other than identifying the problems and
I forgot
working
your
on
question.
it?
Sorry, I forgot your question. Could you repeat it? Sorry, Nolan is a very good friend of mine. I apologize.
Thank you.
I don't know what the question is, so let me
For
understand.
assess to mark with integrity, marking with integrity,
Yes.
or creative output.
So the same question as Dr. Hassan Jalkadib, where you provide greater marks according to critical thinking rather than criteria. Is it the same question?
No, it's
Because
not.
I forgot the question.
No, in the theory, in the literature, are there any specific, whoever philosophers put the cause or put the problems, did they suggest some of the strategies or some solutions
To what?
for bias, for not marking with integrity?
Yes.
Yeah?
So I think I came a bit late.
Yes, I did.
So yes, there
Start
are.
track.
So it's fine, I don't mind. So yes, at the beginning, I will not repeat, of course, the presentation. I know you very well.
So you mentioned the solutions
Yes.
before you mentioned the causes?
No, we talked about the association. Then we talked about the causes. Then we talked about bias and how there's intended and unintended. Of course, I can discuss the whole thing with you in the office if you want. But I believe a lot of things about classes.
Also, academic jurisdiction is very important in case of subjective assessment.
Yes.
Academic jurisdiction based on, you know already your students, you have to cover the material with them.
Yeah.
They start to know who shines and who is less based on specific criteria and particularly academic jurisdiction.
To be honest, when we discuss philosophy, it is a pool of water that is so deep you will never reach the end. So today I was trying to increase your awareness, and I know that I increase your awareness. But the question that you throw ahead, I know her very well. I can answer all your questions as I have done previously for the past 4 years. I will do them in the office. Thank you for coming late. I thank everyone online that was with us, and I thank you so much. I hope this was productive.